This is Fat to Fierce. Welcome to the Confidence Chronicles. I'm your host, Amy English. Join me on this empowering adventure towards a healthier relationship with food, body, and self, one delicious bite at a time. Welcome to episode 44 of the Confidence Chronicles. I am so happy you're here today. And listen, we're about a week away from Thanksgiving here in the United States. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to talk about the holiday as it's approaching. And the reason why is I'd like to focus on how to feel better about food, specifically food and eating as we approach Thanksgiving, and especially on Thanksgiving. Because listen, if you're anything like how I used to be, okay, if this rings familiar for you, I would tend to go overboard on Thanksgiving, and not even just like during the meal, but a lot of times for me, and this used to happen when I was in the throes of emotional eating and binge eating and just overeating in general. When I was around people, so when I was around family for holidays like Thanksgiving, I would tend to not eat a lot because I was very self-conscious and I was afraid people were watching and paying attention to what I was eating. And so I would be very self-conscious and not overeat, right? Not eat a lot. But then what would happen is, whether we were hosting or we were at somebody's house, afterwards, when all the people were gone, that's when, my old habits would come to play. Right. So that's when I would start digging in, so to speak, to the leftovers or to whatever, we had in the house, because I was so like restrained during the meal, during the holiday itself, that I kind of unleashed when I was back to being alone, right? When people weren't around, when there were no witnesses. So today, I thought it might be helpful to talk about that, right? And what that's all about. And really, I think what it's all about is just that, not wanting witnesses, right? Feeling ashamed about what we eat, and so trying to restrict ourselves and restrain, and then realizing that that doesn't work, right? And so that's why we tend to go nuts when there are no witnesses, when nobody's around. So just kind of like understanding that and why that happens, and maybe it is just part of the habit, right? What's behind that mode, if that's something that you struggle with, and also how to have a more balanced approach to food during the holidays, but not just during the holidays, like anytime, because quite honestly, that used to happen no matter what. That used to happen at any time we were with a lot of people or family gatherings, where I would tend to just be like overly mindful, and not eat a lot of food. And then as soon as we were alone, or I was by myself, it was just like something in me unleashed, and it would just turn into like a whirlwind moment where I would have a binge or like an excessive overeat. So I think it's interesting. And I also think that it's something that a lot of people struggle with. Remember, there's a lot of shame associated to this. And I love the quote by Brene Brown that says something to the effect of, shame cannot survive in the light, right? I don't have the exact quote written down. It just came up in my head right now as I was talking, but it's something to that effect, meaning when we keep the shame locked in and we don't give it that light, right? It has no way to heal. It has no way to change, right? And so we want to put it in the light, because we don't need to have it continue to linger, right? Because that shame is never helpful. In fact, when we're holding on to so much shame because of our eating habits, that will tend to only make the emotional eating the habit grow and continue. So we want to recognize that, okay? And the most important thing I believe that anyone can do is, acknowledge the fact that, these eating habits have been at play for a really long time, okay? We've talked about this, right? For a lot of people, it is so common that emotional eating, binge eating, overeating, turning to food for comfort, that this habit starts as kids. I've shared before, anywhere between the ages of 8 and 13. Those are the earliest memories my clients have of using food for comfort, of using food as a go-to, as the friend, right? As a way to soothe and comfort. And so it's not surprising that these habits have just kind of gone on for years and decades, kind of I don't want to say unnoticed, because we absolutely notice them, but kind of like left to their own devices, right? Unguarded, unguided. They've just kind of been like happening while we try to manage through our lives and do the best we can to not do them, which typically didn't work. And that's where, dieting has always kind of been, at least it was for me, was this solution, even though it wasn't a solution. Go on a diet, that'll help, and it helps with weight loss, but it never helped when it came to the relationship with food, right? This is why we need to focus on healing the relationship with food. This is not the time to start restricting and following somebody else's meal plan. There's a time and a place for that. What we want to do, in particular on this podcast, is focus on the relationship with food and understanding more about it. So without further ado, and before I get into too many rants, because I can feel it coming on today, let's talk about how to make the Thanksgiving experience feel better, okay? Because here's the thing, especially when it comes to holidays, there's oftentimes a lot of food that's there that we don't typically eat. Like there's special dishes, right? There's certain foods you just don't have normally throughout the year. They're kind of reserved for these specific holidays, like Thanksgiving in the United States. And so what can happen, and just hang with me here and see if this resonates for you. What used to happen for me is that I would feel like I need to eat all of it and as much as possible, because this is the only time of the year I'm going to get fried corn. Fried corn is one of my favorites on Thanksgiving. I mean, I can't eat it anymore, sadly, because digestive issues. Corn just doesn't work for me anymore. But it's something that I used to love, and it's so you get these dishes, these foods that you don't normally have. So there's almost like this, like, gotta eat it, gotta get as much as I can, because I'm not gonna have this again until next year. And that is just that's very much a lack mentality when it comes to certain foods. Think about it. When you're focused on not being able to have this, got to get it all in, probably not the best strategy, okay? Especially if you want to feel better. Because let's face it, I don't know about you, but Thanksgiving in my family has always been a carb heavy meal. I don't do well with a ton of carbs and sugars and salt and stuff like that. It leaves me feeling terrible. So, because you got the mashed potato, I'm talking complex carbs, right? So you got the mashed potatoes, the sweet potatoes, the corn, the stuffing, the cranberry sauce. Okay. And yeah, sure, there's turkey. There's your protein, but it kind of is like counterbalanced to all the other heavy carbs that are there at that meal. And I would often walk away from the table or from the episode after eating the leftovers when everyone was gone, feeling terrible. Okay. Heartburn overnight. My hands and arms would get all tingly. like just a bad feeling. So, what I'm going to talk about today is something I'm pretty sure I've talked about in a previous episode, although I could not for the life of me remember which one it was. I'm going to talk about the hunger scale, okay? Because the hunger scale is a fantastic tool to use when it comes to these holidays, like Thanksgiving, all right? It helps to create a more balanced approach to eating and enjoying the things, right? Because remember, while yes, the Thanksgiving meal and other holiday meals can contain a lot of heavy carb type foods, maybe a lot of sugar, sodium, things like that, and these like delicious treats of whatever you're having, right? It doesn't mean they have to be off limits entirely, okay? That's one extreme. But it also doesn't mean that we have to like eat as much as we possibly can because we're not going to get it again until next year. That's kind of the other extreme, right? And so if we don't dabble in extremes, right? We don't want to dabble in extremes anymore because they're just not helpful. We want to kind of find that balance, the balance that works best for us. And that's going to be different for every individual. How do you meet yourself in the middle? How do you create that balance for yourself? And for me, a huge way to help create balance for myself when it comes to food, especially some holiday favorites, is by utilizing the hunger scale. Okay. So we're going to get into this in depth during this episode. And I hope you're able to take some notes. And I'm excited that this is going to be shared the Thursday before Thanksgiving because it's going to give you some time to play with this. And of course, I'm talking about Thanksgiving in the United States. Okay. So, but here's the deal. This is going to give you, no matter where you live, this will give you a chance to practice before your next big holiday. All right. And so that's what we want to do here, right? Because all of this takes practice. And the beautiful thing about the hunger scale is that you can practice this anywhere at any time. Let me take it back. Let me share a story really quickly before I dive into this. So I want to talk about the time that I first shared the hunger scale with my kids. They were young. We were living in Georgia, so they were maybe, I don't know, 9 and 10 years old. And we were at a restaurant. We were sitting at a restaurant. We had gone to one of our favorite breakfast spots, and the four of us were at a restaurant. And I talked about the hunger scale and I shared it with them. And they started using it. And what really fascinates me, so first of all, in our house, no food is restricted. I've never gotten into restriction with my kids. I have taught them how to use the hunger scale, how to listen to their bodies, to know whether they're physically hungry or not, and that there's room for all foods, right? There's room for everything. You just get to decide how much you want to have based on how you feel. And so I absolutely like, I bake cookies. We have sweet treats. I get them little snacks every week that they like to have after school and things like that. So it's a more mindful approach to eating. And yeah, we were sitting at a restaurant when I taught them how to use that. It was a very busy restaurant too. There were a lot of people, and I explained how the hunger scale works, and they actually were practicing it in the moment with me. So I share that just to say, like, you can literally do this anywhere at any time. And you can absolutely share it with the people that you love and care about because it's just a helpful tool for getting to know your body better and understanding what physical hunger feels like. Because here's another shocking thing. Couldn't think of a better word in the moment. It is surprising, not so much, but it is interesting how many people do not know what physical hunger feels like in their bodies. We're so focused on the emotional hunger and the mental hunger, okay? The food voices, that's the, I could really go for something sweet. Oh, I really want something crunchy. Today was a terrible day at work. Hand over the chocolate and nobody gets hurt, okay? That's all mental and emotional hunger. Ooh, I could really go for a cheeseburger, okay? That's not physical hunger talking. Yes, you might be physically hungry in the moment, But when you're like, I could really go for that, chances are it's mental and emotional hunger. And there is a big difference between physical hunger and mental and emotional hunger. And the hunger scale is going to help differentiate between that so you can start listening to your body. This doesn't mean that you're not going to indulge and enjoy, your favorites from time to time. Absolutely. What this is going to do is help you get more familiar with what physical hunger feels like in your body and making decisions on what types of food you want to eat to feel your best. Okay. And it's interesting. So I started using the hunger scale about 8 years ago, 7 to 8 years ago, and it has completely altered the way that I eat, the types of food I choose, the quantities of food. Now, in the last 7 or 8 years, have I definitely overindulged at times? Yes, of course. Okay. Yeah, I have my favorites that I like to have, but those times have grown like they're fewer, they happen a lot less. There's a lot more time in between those moments, and the intensity is much less, right? So whereas before I could probably easily eat a dozen chocolate chip cookies, now I maybe have like 3 or 4 is my max, right? It's a big difference because I'm paying attention to how they feel in my body. And my goal is always to feel my best. That's why I do all this stuff, okay? I just want to feel as good as I possibly can on this human journey. All right. Um, that's my point for a lot of what I do. All right. So let's dive in to how the hunger scale works and how this helps to create more balance, especially during the holidays. So, first of all, number one, what I would like to share is that although there are certain dishes that are reserved for the holidays, that doesn't mean you can't have them at another time. Okay. There's this really great bread that my mom used to make while I was growing up. It's called Placek, and it's like a Polish coffee cake. Okay. I'm Polish. And she would only make it during Easter or during Christmas when I was a kid. And so we always looked forward to it, right? We always enjoyed Placek. And as I was growing up, I would notice, and as I was learning all this about my body and with food, I would notice during the holidays when Plotzig was around, I would tend to overeat it because I was only getting it, in the spring and in the winter. And I think by the time I was an adult, she was only making it during Easter time. So I was only getting it during the spring. Well, guess what? I learned how to make Plotzig. I can make Plotzig anytime I want. My kids love it. So, in fact, I just made a batch of it yesterday for my daughter's Friendsgiving at school. The band gets together and does a whole Friendsgiving, which is amazing. And she takes Plotzig every year. So, like, I can make it anytime I want. And what's interesting is, so yesterday when it came out of the oven, which is the best time to taste it, I cut off 2 pieces and cut those in half, and each of us had a piece. And what I realized is I was perfectly content with that, and said to my son who wanted more, I was like, you're going to take this for Friendsgiving. I will make more of this for Christmas. Okay. I will make more of this in a couple of weeks. All right. There's no, like, you can make it at other times, right? That's kind of my point in this. It doesn't, if you really want something more than once on the holiday when you have it, like, you can make it and it's just not a big deal. And I just find that fascinating to realize. Okay. So there's that. But here's how the hunger scale works. So first of all, you want to understand what your body feels like when you are physically hungry. Remember, not the mental and emotional chatter, but in your body. What are the sensations that you get when you are physically hungry? I am timing the recording of this podcast perfectly because I'm starting to get hungry right now. I'm noticing physical hunger in my body. And so I'm going to describe what that feels like for me in hopes that it can help you listeners understand what it feels like in your body so that you can decide. And remember, every human body is different. So what physical hunger feels like for me might be different than what it feels like for you. Okay. Right now, what I'm starting to notice is a rumble in my tummy. Okay. I'm starting to kind of feel it, like things are feeling a little empty in my stomach, right? It's like the slightest growl. Okay. I'm not hearing anything yet, but I can sense it, right? It's kind of like an empty feeling where, and I like to think of the hunger scale as a gas gauge. Okay. So, like in your car, right? When it gets to empty, right? That's like the emptiness in here. I can tell, I can feel physically it's getting to be the time to start putting some fuel into my body, right? I notice like a slight headache, really slight. Okay. It's another thing. Now, if I let myself go too long without eating, that's when I can get hangry. Okay. That's when I can start to get a little shaky. This is never helpful, okay, to get hangry, because at that point I will just eat whatever is close in the closest proximity to me. That is never helpful. So I don't like to get to that place where I get hangry. This is another reason why I like to eat higher protein meals, right? Because that helps with that, as opposed to eating carb heavy meals, which tends to, I just burn through it quicker, right? And then I'm getting that hangry again. So recognizing the physical sensations you feel in your body when your gas tank is on E. Okay. When you're getting empty, what does that feel like? And the way the hunger scale works, like just think of a line. Okay. And 0 is in the middle, and the 0 is neutral. 0 means you're not hungry, you're not full. You're not either. And that's a really powerful awareness as well, to just recognize what your body feels like when you are at neutral, when you are at that 0 mark. You're not hungry and you're not full. Okay. Now, on the hunger side of the scale, this is where it's like, so 0 is neutral. Okay. -1 means you're starting to get a little bit hungry. It's kind of where I'm at right now, where I notice my stomach feeling empty, slight growl, light headache. Okay. It's going to be time to fuel up by the time I'm finished recording this episode. Okay. That's my -1. A -2 would be even hungrier, right? Like really starting, it's really time to eat, which is probably where I'll be when I'm done recording this podcast episode. A -3, starting to get a little twitchy, right? Like really noticing your stomach growl, it's definitely probably past time to eat, right? And we keep going to a -5. And a -5 is that hangry. That's that like shaking. It's like just hand over the cookies or give me something, or like, I just need something to eat because I am starving. Okay. This is where sometimes decisions can be made that are not the most helpful. Okay. Notice I'm very careful about calling them bad decisions. They're not bad decisions. They're just decisions that are potentially not as helpful as we would like them to be. Okay. Big difference. You're not bad. All right. So -5 is that hangry place. We don't want to get to that. We really want to kind of stay around that -2 place when it's time to eat. Okay. That's when we're paying attention to the hunger scale. So, what does neutral feel like for you when you're not hungry and you're not full? You're just neutral. And then what does your body feel like when you're getting hungry on that negative side of the scale? -1, -2. -2 is where we want to start filling the tank. Okay. That's where we want to start filling the tank. Now, on the opposite side of this scale, so on the opposite side of that neutral mark 0, this is where we're starting to fill up our tank. Okay. So this is the fullness scale side of the scale. And so you've got your +1, which is when you're starting to put the fuel in, you're starting to eat, you're starting to put the food in. That's your +1. Your +2 is where you're satisfied. Okay. This is going to require, using the hunger scale really requires paying attention to yourself when you're eating. And this is where it can be really helpful when you're practicing this to monitor distractions. Okay. What that means is perhaps turn off the television, put your phone down and just really pay attention to how you're feeling as you're eating, as you're putting the food in. Okay. Because the goal here is to stop when you're at that +2 mark, because then there's the +3, +4, +5. +5 is when you are stuffed. Okay. I like to call +5 your Thanksgiving full. That is when you need to unbutton your pants because you've definitely eaten too much and you are stuffed. Okay. That doesn't typically feel good. We don't want to get to that point when we're using the hunger scale. Okay. We just want to be mindful and stop around that +2, +3 area. Okay. Stop eating. Now, this can be really telling because if you notice you're at that +2 or +3 on the scale and you want to keep eating, okay, listen, I've been there. I get it. There's no shame in this game. Remember that. But when you want to keep eating, when you're at that +2, +3, that is a great time to get curious with yourself and question it. Why? Why, when I'm at this place of satisfaction, I feel good, I have eaten, I'm at a +2, +3, I don't want to get stuffed. Why do I want to keep eating this food? What is it about this food that has me wanting to keep eating it, to go beyond this place of satisfied? That can be very telling when you're asking that from a place of feeling curious while also holding compassion for yourself, right? Because there is no shame. So just get curious and question it and decide, do I want to keep going till I get to a +4 or a +5? Or do I want to stop now and maybe come back to this, save it for later, whatever, until I am hungry again. Okay. Again, this is all about being curious with yourself and getting to know your body and getting to understand why you want to keep eating when you're past that +2, +3 stage. I like to be at a nice +2.5. Okay. While I'm eating. So I'll eat after this and I'll get to that 2.5 place and I will stop. And then I will be good probably for several hours. Now, that's the other thing about the hunger scale. It really kind of helps you decide when the best times are for you to eat. Okay. And really, we've talked about practicing the pause before when it comes to emotional eating, overeating, and binge eating, where you literally stop yourself and hit the pause button and check in with your body to see if you're hungry. Okay. This is where using the hunger scale is super effective, because when you're pressing the pause button on yourself, let's say, for example, let me paint a picture. Let's say, I don't know, you really want a snack. Okay. It's like a snack time. I really want a snack. I really want some chips or some crackers or something to snack on. Okay. You hit pause and you check in. Well, am I physically hungry right now? Yes or no? Where are you on that scale, on this hunger scale we just talked about? Are you at a neutral? Are you at a +1, meaning you're not hungry at all? You're kind of on the way to feeling stuffed? Or are you at a -1, -2? Where are you on the scale? That's going to help you know if you're actually physically hungry or if it's more of a mental, emotional hunger. So you're hitting the pause button on yourself. You're checking in and determining where you are based on the hunger scale. Okay. And then in that moment, you decide based on where you are, do I want to eat this or do I want to wait? All this is doing is putting you in the driver's seat. This is putting you in charge of your journey. It's putting you at the wheel. Okay. This is how you take your power back from food, my friends. All right. Understanding your physical hunger is such a huge part to overcoming the habit of emotional eating, binge eating, and overeating. All right. Because you start to use your body as a guide to understand where you are on this scale and what your body feels like when it is physically hungry and when you are physically satisfied. All right. And so you can see by practicing this tool how it will start to create balance for you when you are eating. All right. And also, when you're paying attention to this, even when there's those favorites that are around for the holidays and you're thinking, oh, I got to get all of these mashed potatoes that my aunt makes because they are so delicious and I don't get to have these as, any other time but now. But if you're paying attention to the hunger scale, like you enjoy them and you stop, because here's the key, right? Feeling better is more important than those mashed potatoes. And here's another thing that I just thought of as I'm recording right now. And I'm using mashed potatoes as an example. You may hate mashed potatoes, but I hope you'll get where I'm going with this. All right. When we are so focused on that lack mentality of only being able to have these, once a year at Thanksgiving because Aunt whoever, that's the only time she makes these delicious mashed potatoes. Okay. When we are so focused on that and we're ignoring our bodies, you see what happens. It's like the idea of not getting them again kind of takes over, where we're not even really enjoying them in the moment or paying attention to how they're leaving us feeling. Absolutely enjoy the mashed potatoes. Go for it. But pay attention to how you're feeling. And when you learn to trust your body and pay attention to how satisfied you're getting, you're not so focused on the fact that they're not going to be around tomorrow, okay? Which is going to actually free up mental space for you to enjoy them in the moment. And that is huge. All right. I am going to invite you to practice this. Practice the hunger scale. If nothing else, just get familiar with what your body feels like at neutral when you're not full or hungry and what your physical hunger sensations are. And if you want to get support with this, then I'm going to invite you to head to my website, amyenglishcc.com, and get the Fat to Fierce program, okay? Because in that program, I go in depth on the hunger scale. It's one of the key components to the Fat to Fierce program. And quite honestly, there's so many tools. There are so many different tools that I've shared on this journey throughout this podcast and throughout my blog. The hunger scale is absolutely one of those game changers. You can practice it anywhere, anytime. It is just getting familiar with what your body feels like. If you would like individual support getting to know this tool and getting familiar with this, then you can absolutely reach out and schedule a connection call from my website. All right. 1 week before Thanksgiving here in the United States. I hope you have a great week. I hope you have found this helpful, and I'll see you soon. Are you ready to take control of your eating, embrace your body, and boost your confidence? Then let's get fierce. Start your Fat to Fierce journey today. Go to amyenglishcc.com for more resources and to book your discovery call.